Hello everyone. Thank you for watching Edupedia World videos. The second topic in our training is SAP Basis and NetWeaver Overview. So, in our first topic we have seen what is ERP. SAP is a vendor of ERP, and we have seen like how SAP has origined, what are the pros and cons, and what methodology SAP follows. So in this topic we will learn more technical details of SAP. So the SAP application editions. We have seen earlier, like initially SAP started with real-time data processing, then came R2, R3 and mysap.com. So the first one is R2. R stands for real-time data processing. This is it's only a server architecture and it had only green screen UI, user interface. Next came R3. R3 is ideally a client-server architecture. It uses the basis for technology stack. So if you remember, so earlier the technology stack of SAP was known as basis and the user interface was desktops. Later came R3 Enterprise. Here basis was replaced with web as. AS stands for application server and here it had web-based user interface. Then finally, right now we are on mysap, where we have web-based UI and web application server now are more called as only application servers. So the first one starts with R2. It's only a server architecture. It had only green screen UIs. Then came R3. So it's a 3 level: database level, the application level and the presentation level, where the desktops were used as the user interface, desktop client, and here the SAP technology stack is called as basis. Then came R3. So R3 Enterprise. So here the basis is renamed as web application server. So whatever the basis technology stack, the technology platform of SAP is there, it was extended to web also. So it could receive requests from web also. So that's why that whatever server is there, it's named as web application server. So here we had both desktop clients UI as well as web-based UI. And now the latest one is mysap, where mostly we have web-based user interfaces and it's like no more called as web as, now it's only named as application server. And the solution manager is introduced. Later we'll see what the solution manager is. It's actually a central system from where we can manage, monitor. It's like a centrally managed system. So that is introduced from R3 Enterprise Edition. Now, how basis has evolved? In R3, if we take, basis is the complete technology stack and application stack. Runs ABAP programs, all application logic is contained in the basis server. Basis acts as the application server using proprietary protocols to communicate to the desktop client. All changes to SAP application made in basis. So see, now SAP is a software, so it's a system of its own. So the technology part, the central, it's like basis is nothing but it manages everything. So it provides the support for us to build all the programs, whatever it is, SAP program or the kernel programs. So that is basis. So in R3 we had only basis. Then ABAP programs were built and executed on this basis server. So this basis acted as an application server and using some protocols, it used to communicate with the desktop clients. See, like we have a system now. This is just my system. There is an SAP server there. So the basis is nothing but it's the SAP server itself. So it uses some protocols to communicate with the desktop clients, and all changes to SAP application are made in basis. Then SAP moved to R3 Enterprise Edition. Here basis was split into basis and WebAS. WebAS uses standard internet protocols to communicate with web browsers. Basis version numbers aligned with WebAS versions. Basis conceptually used only for administrators like migrations, performance monitoring, etc. So in R3, the SAP technology stack was divided into basis and web application server. So it used to communicate with both desktop clients as well as internet using web protocols. And WebAS and basis version are same. Then also, like, people used to, basis was mostly used by administration purpose. So users started accessing the SAP system from the web, whereas the core team which manages the SAP system used to directly log on to the SAP R3 system. Now in my SAP, basis conceptually equivalent to WebAS. Since the introduction of WebAS, basis versions are referred either as both X.YZ, that is example 6.10 like 610, 7.0 or 700, where X.YZ is the WebAS version number. So in my SAP, like now it's entirely nothing but a web application server or simply application server. So the basis version, so even that stack had a basis version. So when we say like this is the WebAS version number, so the basis number is also equivalent to the WebAS version number. We have seen like R3 like was from 3.2 something to 6.2, 6.4. So 6.4, it's more or less known as 640, 6.2, 620, 7.0, 700, like that. That's how. So initially it was like only basis, then it came basis and WebAS. Now it's nothing but the entire server is known as web application server. SAP based the architecture of R3 on a 3-tier client server model. So R3, 3 stands for 3 layers are there. These are the 3 layers: the presentation server, the GUI, the graphical user interface, the application server, and the database server. What is this presentation server? The presentation server is actually a program named SAP GUI.exe. It is usually installed on a user's workstation. The presentation server displays the R3 menus within SAP GUI window. The interface accepts input from the users in form of keystrokes, mouse clicks, function keys, and send these requests to the application server to be processed. The application server sends the results back to the GUI, SAP GUI, which then formats the output for display to the user. So the presentation server now till today, like as SAP, it's using 3-tier architecture. Like at the end we have the database server, in the middle it's the application server, that is the actual SAP server, and on the top we have the actual GUI. Now, like whatever order I have given here, what is this presentation server? It's actually a program named SAP GUI.exe. So on the client desktop workstation, this is installed. So once you open that SAP GUI.exe, it displays the R3 menus within that window. So here we can give the input in form of keystrokes or mouse clicks. These are sent to the application server. Again, internally it goes to the database server, it gets processed, comes back, and finally it moves, and even the output is produced on the presentation server. So this SAP GUI.exe has to be installed on every user desktop. right now we are having web. Okay, so that web communication is again different. Web also, it's a 3-tier architecture, but instead of this SAP GUI.exe program, we open the web browser that in turn sends request to the application server, and then internally it gets processed within the database server. I'll just show you that figure in the coming slide. The next one is the application server. The application server is a collection of executables that collectively interpret the ABAP for ABAP. What is this ABAP? ABAP is nothing but it's a language of SAP. It stands for Advanced Business Application Programming. It's a 4th generation language, and manage the input and output for them. Each application server has a profile that specifies the characteristics when it starts up and while it's running. For example, an application server profile specifies the number of processes and their types, the memory, the length of time a user is inactive before being automatically logged off, etc. So here this application server is nothing but the actual SAP server. So it has a collection of executables to interpret this ABAP language programs. Then each application server, it has a profile on its own, okay, which specifies like its characteristics, like when it starts up and it's running. Some profile parameters are like how many processes it has, how much memory it has, and etc, etc. So the presentation server is nothing but it's a GUI in case of a desktop UI client. Okay, web directly will open the web browser and it accesses the application server. Coming to the application server is the actual R3 server. It has some executables to interpret this ABAP programs, okay, and give the output accordingly, and it has a profile. The next one is the application layer consists of one or more application servers and a message server. Each application server contains a set of services used to run the R3 system. The message server is responsible for communication between the application server. It passes requests from one application server to another within the system. It also contains information about the application server groups and the current load balancing within them. It uses this information to choose an appropriate server when user logs on to the system. So I'll just move on to the actual program. See, this is how the architecture is. So this is the presentation layer. Client SAP GUI. Web browser also you can use. Okay, just we'll leave this Java part for some time. We'll look at the ABAP system. Okay, so we have GUI, or using this browser, this SAP web application server is accessed, and at the bottom we have DB. So I have told you like there are 3 layers: layer 1 presentation, layer 2 application, layer 3 database. So whenever this client SAP GUI, I have told you like this SAP GUI.exe program is used to open that. So using that program we access the SAP application server. Now here application server, I have told you like it can contain one or more application servers and a message server. So when I say an SAP system, it is not only just one server, but you can have multiple servers depending upon your business needs. So we'll have you can have n number of servers, but you have only one message server. So this message server is responsible for communication between the application servers, and it also does load balancing. So whenever a user logs on, okay, so here in this picture I'm showing only one system. You can have multiple servers. So through this message server, the requests are passed to any one of the application server from the SAP GUI, and this message, so it helps in load balancing. And the next one is this message server also helps in communication between the application servers themselves. Okay, and when the client, I'll come to this part now, this web request. So this is understood now. So here in this picture we are showing only one server. Similarly, you can have 2 2, 3, 4, n servers. So when a request is made from the client SAP GUI, it comes to the message server and it helps you, it passes on that request to one of the application server. So this message server helps in load balancing as well as intercommunication between the SAP application servers also. So we are clear with the presentation server and the application server. And one more thing which I have told is like each application server has a profile. So it defines its characteristics when the system is started and running. Now the third part, the bottom part, is the database server. This database server handles the user's request for addition, retrieval and modifications in the data. It is also responsible for maintaining concurrency control. The SAP Client Server architecture is developed on the SAP Web Application Server. With the SAP Web as, when I say as, it means application server, you can implement both server-based and client-based web applications. The web application server can execute depending on your chosen installation option, ABAP or Java programs. This means you can use the ABAP-based business server pages and a Java technology JSP to create web applications. So this is the actual database server, like this one, where the data is stored actually. So here all the manipulations of data are made here, and we have developed the SAP architecture in such a way that you can have two types of system now, ABAP or Java. So you can and in R3 SAP has introduced web as. So on an ABAP system also, from an ABAP system also, you can access the internet. So there comes this ICM. Okay, so we have two types, and the other one is the sole Java system. Okay, so we don't have the ABAP part. So depending upon whatever installation you want, we can install it accordingly. So we have two installation options, the SAP Web Application Server ABAP system. These graphics are shown in the left. The Web Application Java system, these are shown on the right side. The SAP Web Application ABAP plus Java systems, these are all the components of the graphic. So SAP actually started with only ABAP first, so it's only this part. Then later in the ABAP system, it was extended to fetch the request from the web also. Then this ICM and internet came into picture. Right now most of the systems, not most, but they are only Java systems also, SAP Java installations, where we don't have ABAP anymore. Directly we have the Java and then the requests. Okay, so this side is clear, no? So here the requests come from the SAP GUI, it gets onto the message server, it sends the request to any one of the SAP Web as server, then it goes to the database and it comes out. Now the Internet Communication Manager ICM sets up the connection to the internet. It can process both server and client web pages. It supports the protocols like HTTP, HTTPS and SMTP. So here further extension was made to the ABAP server. So using a piece of software known as Internet Communication Manager, that is ICM, it started receiving web requests also. It can get both client and server web pages. Then these are again internally processed through the ABAP work process. So every SAP ABAP web application server has ABAP work process. With set ABAP installation, you have ABAP work process. So from the internet ICM, see now here one more important component is the dispatcher. Okay, and I'll just go through this piece now. The dispatcher distributes the request to the ABAP work process. The ABAP work process actually execute the ABAP code. Okay, so first from GUI it comes to the message server, then it goes to the dispatcher. Okay, this message server is common for all the SAP, the entire SAP system, that is all the SAP servers. every application server has one dispatcher of its own. Once the request comes to the dispatcher, it sends to any one of the ABAP work process. These work process actually perform the processing of the code from in the database. Okay, and again they send it to the dispatcher, and it finally goes to the presentation layer again. So the GUI, you log on, it goes to the message server, it sends to one of the application server, the dispatcher picks up, we have a dispatcher queue, it picks it up. So the request is processed via the ABAP work process in the database, and again the request is sent back. If it is a web request, then it comes to the internet communication manager, then it goes to the dispatcher ABAP work process, and it gets processed in the database. What is this gateway? We have one more component here, the gateway. This gateway makes the RFC interface between the application instances available. So using this gateway, you can communicate between the application servers of one SAP system to the another. The message server exchanges messages and balances the load in the SAP system. That's what. This message server helps in communication of load balancing. Okay, and communication between the different SAP web application servers also. This is like an SAP ABAP system. And ABAP, I have told you, it stands for Advanced Business Application Programming. Now, we have only a Java system also, SAP Java system. So here, instead of ABAP work process, we have the Java server process. It's known as ABAP work process. Here it's known as Java server process. So here we have a Java dispatcher, and here we have two, a message server and an enqueue server. So the requests come. Okay, so here also, and the ICM plays a critical role. So once the requests are sent, they go to the Java dispatcher, and then they get processed through the Java server process in the database. And here we have one more component known as Software Deployment Manager. So in detail, so coming to the Java part, we'll discuss it later. So in our present training, we'll concentrate more on the ABAP stack. So this is the three-tier architecture. Either it is an ABAP or Java. We have the presentation layer where requests can come from the SAP GUI or from the web. Then we have either ABAP application server or a Java application server, and at the bottom we have a database. So here we have a message server. Both here also we have a message server. So this helps in communication between the different application servers. We can have n number of SAP application servers, but for an SAP system we will have only one database. So this message server helps to send the request to either one of the application server. Here also in Java also it's the same. Then it moves on to the dispatcher of the particular application server. Here we have Java dispatcher. Then if it's a Java, it gets processed through Java server process. In ABAP, it gets processed through ABAP work process from the database. So we can have SAP application servers, many, but for an SAP system, we have only one database. And if it's an ABAP system, to process the web applications, requests from the web, it comes from the internet to this internet communication manager. Then it sends to this dispatcher, and it gets processed in the ABAP work process, or it can send to the Java dispatcher and it will get processed in the Java server process. And we have a gateway server also. This gateway server helps in communication with the SAP system to other systems, other external systems. So this is the three-tier architecture of SAP. So don't worry, later we'll go into more depth and we'll see like what each of this component is. So web as is nothing but the application server that replaced basis, uses standard internet protocol so that it can communicate with web browsers. It hosts ABAP engine. It runs ABAP applications. Version 6.2 had the first J2E engine so that it could write Java applications as well as ABAP. So the concept of this web application server came from SAP version 6.2 or 620. Earlier to that, the technology part of SAP is known as only basis. So from this 620 version, SAP processes both ABAP requests as well as Java requests also. Then what is ECC? ECC stands for ERP Core Components. It separates the application logic from the technology stack. All the modules you would buy, like example payroll, etc., are thought of now in ECC before they were thought as of in basis. Earlier, like SAP had only basis. Whatever functionality it provided, everything was in basis only. But right now, all these modules are separated, and now SAP terms as ECC. That's why. See, we have discussed earlier, like SAP has various modules like FICO, MM, PM, SD, like this. So each one is used, each of this module gives its own, purpose. It's say like sales is managed by SDT in sales and distribution. Finance, we have FICO module like that. For materials and everything, we have MM like this. So all these modules now are separated from the technology stack, that is the basis stack, and the entire all these modules together with the technology stack, it's known as ECC. NetWeaver, this was just a bundling of the standard technology stack, and now even this SAP NetWeaver has different components like SAP Web Application Server, Enterprise Portal, Business Intelligence, Exchange Integration, and WebAst renamed as just Application Server going forward. So earlier it's only known as basis server. Basis is nothing but the technology plus functionality also. Later basis is separated, it's renamed as NetWeaver, and other components, functionality components, all together it's known as ECC, ERP Core Components. That's why we call it as an ECC system. And the technology stack is renamed as NetWeaver because it's not only the application server, but we have other technologies like Enterprise Portal, Business Intelligence, Exchange Integration, like this, so many. So that's why this entire, all this technology plus the functionality together is known as ECC, and the technology part is known as NetWeaver. It comprises of the actual application server plus all these things, the new dimensions like portal, BI, etc. What is ABAP? ABAP stands for Advanced Business Application Programming. This is a high-level programming language created by the German software company SAP. It is currently positioned along the more recently introduced Java as the language for programming the SAP application server, part of its NetWeaver platform for building business applications. So ABAP is the program developed by SAP. It's used to process. In this ABAP only all the programs are written. So later Java was also added. So SAP now it can serve two types of requests, ABAP as well as Java. This is the actual proprietary programming language of SAP. ABAP doesn't really have versions, it depends on the basis versions being run. So ABAP itself doesn't have any version, it depends on whatever basis, say like 6.2, ABAP is also 6.2, 700, ABAP version is also 700. All the ABAP programs reside inside the SAP database. They are not stored in a separate external files like Java or C++ programs. So all programs, they exist in the SAP database only, ABAP programs. Okay, they are not external files. ABAP programs execute under the control of the runtime system, which is a part of the SAP kernel. You see, all these are new concepts which you are coming across, like SAP kernel. Okay, so don't worry, we'll understand more of these technology terms later. So these programs, like operating system is there, like every operating system, Unix, or if you take AIX, it has a kernel where the actual software is written, and it helps in maintaining of that operating system. Similarly, SAP also has one core software known as SAP kernel. So whatever ABAP programs are written, so this SAP kernels provides a runtime environment for all these programs. A key component of the ABAP runtime system is the database interface, which turns database independent ABAP statements, that is the OpenSQL, into statements understood by the underlying DBMS, that is the native SQL. The database interface handles all the communication with the relational database on behalf of ABAP programs. It also contains extra features such as buffering of tables and frequently accessed data in local memory of the application server. Now, SAP system is platform independent. It can be attached to any OS and database, and it has its own language as ABAP. So whatever statements are written in this ABAP, they are database independent. Okay, it's known as OpenSQL. So to convert that OpenSQL into the actual SQL statements which are understood by the specific database, the native SQL, we have one more interface component known as database interface in this ABAP runtime environment. So that converts this OpenSQL into native SQL. Say we have an SAP system, we can attach either DB2 server or Oracle. So on the top, all the ABAP programs are written in OpenSQL. So if it is, so that is not Oracle dependent or DB2 dependent. So that SQL has to be converted into the actual SQL statements which are like self, like Oracle will have its own syntax, DB2 will have its own syntax. So to convert them, this OpenSQL into the actual native SQL, we have an interface known as database interface in the ABAP runtime environment. So that helps in this conversion. And this database interface, this ABAP runtime environment, also contains some extra features like buffering, okay, of tables and frequently accessed data in the local memory of the application server. So each application server also has its own buffers. Okay, rather than fetching from the database now and then, you can put all the frequently accessed code and data in this buffers also. So even this database interface also takes care of this buffering also. Then, so see, I'm just giving a basic overview of what SAP Basis and NetWeaver is. Later, we'll just go into details of all these technical terms. Then comes SAP Service Marketplace. SAP Service Marketplace provides support for business applications, analytics solutions, and platform support, including software download, license key requests, customer messages in the SAP Notes database. So SAP Service Marketplace is maintained by SAP. It provides support for all the business applications, the solutions, whatever platforms it supports, including its own software downloads, license key, customer messages, and SAP Notes database, everything. So it's the central repository which is maintained by SAP. You'll need a S user ID to log into the SAP Service Marketplace. These are issued to SAP customers and partners only. An S user ID can be used to log into other SAP sites such as SCN also, SAP Community Network. So to log into this SAP Service Marketplace, you need a S-user ID. Here are a few ways to search for what you are looking for on SAP Service Marketplace, like SAP X Search to find SAP notes and knowledge-based articles, SAP Support Portal content areas in documents, consulting content, and more. SAP Notes and Knowledge Database article search, then search.sap.com, like this. So this SAP Service Marketplace itself has various links. Okay. Then support will not be provided through the feedback process. If you need any technical support regarding the support applications in the SAP Support Portal or concerning your SAP solutions, please use the customer message wizard. You need a S-user ID. Service Marketplace login required. So from this SAP Service Marketplace is a central deposit. Okay, you can find like whatever SAP, as it releases new versions, it will upload all its software here, so you can download from this SAP Service Marketplace. Then help topics, other all like what all information you want about SAP, it's available in this Service Marketplace. To access this, you need an S-user ID. Okay, but if you need any technical support for your SAP solution, then you have to, from this customer message wizard, you have to contact SAP for technical help of your SAP system. The next one is SAP Help Portal. See, it has like all information about the different dimensions in the SAP, like SAP Business Suite, the technology, analytics, in-memory computing, cloud, best practices, mobile database, everything. So this Help Portal is centered. It's a access to the SAP product documentation and also related information such as SAP notes, product availability information, etc. So this is a central depository for all whatever information you need on SAP. The product documentation, it's a central depository. From Service Marketplace, you can move on to this Help Portal. Now, this one is very important, this terminology. SAP Client. What does a client mean? In the SAP landscape, a client is an entity with independent information and data. The SAP client concept is based on the fact that an application service provider must provide and administer all resources at a minimal cost, which is quite challenging in a multiple customer client environment. SAP provides the option of allocating each customer to a client, thereby removing the need to provide separate physical systems for each customer. This helps reduce physical hardware and sharing of hardware and related software, thereby reducing administration and support requirements and facilitates clients and a large number of customers. The SAP client concept allows an organization to split a system into logical subunits. Clients may operate as separate business units where all data is stored in a common database. Access rights for each client are defined during the installation process. Client-specific data includes user master data, data customization, and application business data. Okay. Now this client is nothing but it's an independent entity in an SAP landscape. Okay. So this is it's you have an SAP system. Okay, it has many application servers. That's what we have understood till now. So in this SAP system, we will have different SAP clients. Each SAP system can have different SAP clients. Okay, so we have n number of users, different users, like one is end user, one is the support team, one can be testing team. So many people access this SAP system. So whatever role you are in, you will access that particular client of the SAP system. So that's how this client concept came into picture. If I'm an end user, I will access one client. If I am an administrator, I will access these clients. If I am, in the testing team, I will access this clients. So the actual data, we have only one database. So through this client, SAP has restricted the information which is accessible to various different users using that system. So if I am an end user, I can access only the set of data. If I am administrator, I will have the access to view the entire data in the database. If I am from the testing team, I will have access only to this data. So depending upon that access restrictions, we have different clients. The number of clients in an SAP system can directly influence the following, like the buffer. The number of clients impacts the buffer demand. An example is the main memory usage. Different activities are affected by SAP upgrades, where runtimes are longer depending on the number of clients, etc. Now, SAP also defines clients with the following roles as required in a complete landscape. Client cust, used for making developments and serving other client customer specific requirements. The SAP transport management system is used to move cust client changes to other clients. Then QST, defined for testing and verifying various applied changes. Then the last one is production, used for production and business activities. Now, the default clients in an SAP system. Client 00001, 066 are the clients created by default in an SAP system. So 000 is an SAP reference client. After installing any SAP system, other clients will be created based on the client 000. 001 is a customizing client which is similar to 000, and 00066 is also a SAP reference client used by early watch service. So when you log on to an SAP system, you choose the client you want to log into. Each one is assigned a 3-digit number which you are required to know at the time of login. This makes it easy to distinguish between clients. So this client is nothing but it's an independent information entity. Client is an entity with independent information data. Okay. Then we have different types of client roles. One is cust for developing, making changes into the web programs and everything. Then QST for testing. Production is used for production activities. So when you initially build an SAP system, we have 3 clients by default. They are created. 000, it's the actual SAP reference client, and all the other clients will be built according to this. Then 001, it's a customizing client similar to 000, and 066, it's used by early watch service. This early watch service is nothing but if you need any help from SAP, they will log on using this client to our systems. So when you log into an SAP system, you should know like which client you want to log into. So each client is assigned a unique 3-digit number. So you should know at the time of login. A programmer developing the SAP system might log into client 100 to do some programming. Client 200 in another system to review and test new business logic, and client 500 in a different system to check out new training system where his code is being used to teach how to use SAP. In same way, an end user might log into client 300 in production system to do his day-to-day work, and occasionally client 200 in a test system to check the status of new functionality he requested be developed for production. So an SAP system we can have in an business, we can have different SAP systems like the development, the quality, and the production. So end users, they mostly log on to the production system. Testing team will log on to this quality system. The developers, they log into the development system. Similarly, if a user himself wants to create something, he can also log into that development system, but to a different client. Okay, so like that, the actual data is same in the database, but depending upon which client you are logging in, the access to the data will be restricted. Okay, so we need not, so one production system can have different clients. Okay, we have very huge, say like company which is there worldwide, so it has like some petroleum, oil, then coal mining. So the coal mining users, they will log into one client because they want one type of data, and the petroleum users, they will log into a different client, similarly others. So instead of creating different systems, we have one system where all the data is kept, and depending upon the client you log in, you can access that information. You can't access the other information. Whereas the basis administrators, they have access to, you have access to all the clients. So because you need to monitor the entire SAP system, it's the testing team, they will have access only to maybe like they want only some access, they need not have full administrator privileges, so they log into a different client. So that's how this client concept came, just to minimize the physical hardware and cutting the costs. To support different roles in the SAP system, we have this concept of clients. And so its client is nothing but it's a 3-digit number, you should know, like when you log into an SAP system. And the client, we have different roles also, cust, QST and production. So in production system, you change the client role to PRT, whereas in the development system, the client role is cust. In quality system, it's kept as QST, like this. And when an SAP system is created, we have these default clients 000, 001 and 066. So this is what is this SAP basis in NetWeaver overview. So this is just an overview. Don't worry, like if you are unable to understand any of the technology terms as of now, so I'll just again go through this topic once. So we have started with what are the different editions of SAP: R2, R3, R3 Enterprise, MySAP. R2, it had only server architecture and green screen UI. R3 came 3-tier architecture where basis was there and desktop UI clients. Then came R3 Enterprise. So here basis was replaced with web application server and web-based UI was there. Even we had desktop UI clients also. So then SAP moved ahead to MySAP, where we have web-based UI and the application server. Web application server is just known as application server. Then here we have seen one more new term known as solution manager. So this is introduced from SAP R3 Enterprise Edition. So the solution manager is nothing but it's a central system from where we can manage rest all systems in a SAP installation. Like we have a project, we have n number of SAP systems, so you can use the solution manager system to connect to all the systems, and from this solution manager you can centrally monitor, administrate all the other systems. Then we have seen like how basis has evolved into NetWeaver. So R3 basis is the technology stack and the application stack. Okay, all ABAP programs are executed in this basis server. Then in R3 Enterprise we have basis as well as web application server concept. Then in MySAP, basis is conceptually equivalent to WebAS. Then we have seen the 3-tier architecture of the SAP system. So we'll have this presentation layer, the application layer and the database layer. So in the presentation layer, through this program named sapgui.exe, each client terminal will execute this program. Through this it will access the SAP application server. Then the actual application server is the SAP application server where all the programs are executed. It has its own profile, and each application SAP system can have n number of application servers, but it has only one database server where all the data is kept. And we have two types of installations, the ABAP system and the Java system. So this is the ABAP part. So from the SAP GUI, it comes to the message server, then it sends the request to one of the application server, then it goes into the dispatcher. If it's an ABAP system, the ABAP work process the data, okay, from the underlying database, and they send it out again. In the SAP web application server, you will have a component known as ICM to get the requests from the internet, and again these are sent to the dispatcher, and they are also processed in the ABAP server process only, ABAP work process, ABAP work process. When we go to the Java installation, we have a Java dispatcher, we also have the message server, and one more component known as NQ server. So here the Java server process, they process the request from the database and they send it back. And we have one more component known as software deployment manager. And this gateway, it's used by the SAP system to communicate with the other systems. Then our next topic is like, what is web application server? Okay, so then we saw like what is ECC. ECC stands for ERP core components. So earlier basis was everything. It is only functionality, it is only technology. Later it's like separated. The functionality is separated from the technology. The technology stack is known as NetWeaver, and for each functionality we have different SAP modules. So all this put together is known as ECC, and the ERP core components, ECC system. Now this NetWeaver, also the technology stack also expanded. We have different dimensions known as enterprise portal, business intelligence, exchange integration, etc. Apart from the actual application server. Then we have ABAP. Okay, what is this? ABAP is Advanced Business Application Programming Language. It's a 4th generation language. So this is the language, proprietary programming language of SAP. So all SAP programs are written and built in this language, and these reside in the SAP database. And SAP has the central runtime system known as SAP kernel, where all these programs are executed. And we have one more. The key component is like the database interface, wherein the open SQL statements, the database independent statements, are understood, converted into the database dependent statements. Okay, and it has additional features like buffering, etc. Next one we have seen is like, what is an SAP service marketplace? It is the central repository of SAP, which includes like software download, this key license, key requests, customer messages, SAP notes, etc., and all the support needed for what all applications SAP is providing us. You will also need to have an user ID to log on to this SAP service marketplace. And if you need any technical support from SAP, there is a wizard known as customer message wizard. From there you can raise a message to SAP to assist you. Then another important portal is this Help Portal. So SAP, what all documentation you want about SAP, it's maintained here in this Help Portal. Okay, you can do just a search, and or you can go to that whatever thing you are looking for, and you can do a search to get the information. The next one is SAP Client. SAP Client is nothing but it's an entity with independent information and data. So one SAP system will have n number of clients. So depending upon the role you are, you will log into that particular client, and you will have access to the data which is restricted to that client. So we have 3 types of roles like cust, QST, and production. And the default clients when an SAP system is built are 000, 001 and 066. So when you log into an SAP system, you should know like what client you are logging into. So this is the basic overview of what SAP Basis and NetWeaver is. Thank you.